Hey folks, welcome back. It's Old Dad Guy, and tonight we're doing something a little different. All through October, I'm shifting gears into full Halloween mode. That means every story you'll hear in this playlist will have that spooky autumn chill running through it. Ghosts, legends, and the kind of tales that are best told with the lights low and maybe a pumpkin or two glowing in the corner. This is the first episode in my Haunted Halloween series, and I'm excited to share it with you. So settle in, grab a blanket, and let's kick off this season together. Pumpkin Row. Every fall, families drove out to Mason's farm to walk Pumpkin Row. It was famous in our county, a line of lanterns stretching half a mile through the fields, each jack-o'-lantern carved and lit by hand. Kids darted between the rows, parents took pictures, teenagers held hands in the flickering glow. You could smell hay rides and kettle corn from the parking lot. Mason's was tradition, and tradition has gravity. I hadn't been in years, not since I was small enough to clutch a parent's hand. But that October, Nora convinced me. "They've got 1,000 pumpkins this year," she said, grinning as if she'd carved them all herself. World record. So I went. I parked under the oaks by the gravel lot, bought cider that steamed in my hands, and stepped out to the fields where orange globes glowed like embers in the dark. Pumpkin Row looked endless. Candles flickered inside every face. Grins, grimaces, opened-mouthed howls. The light wavered in the cool wind, shadows crawling across the earth. Kids squealed, cameras flashed. The air smelled sharp, sweet, and a little rotten from the guts scraped into piles at the row's edge. That smell tugged at something I'd forgotten. Not a memory, something deeper, like a place inside me recognized the rot. We bought tickets for the hayride first. The tractor clanked through the fields while the guide cracked jokes and pointed out scarecrows. When the ride ended, I lagged behind, brushing hay off my jacket. That's when I saw him. Old Mr. Mason stood at the far end of the row. His back was bent, his shoulders nodded under suspenders. A straw hat shaded his face, but his eyes caught the candlelight, glinting pale and sharp. Kids darted around him without a glance, but every so often his hand would hover above a jack-o'-lantern, long fingers twitching, and the flame inside would flare. I'd always heard Mason was just a farmer who liked Halloween, but the way his hand hovered, it looked less like pride and more like control, as if the pumpkins burned because he allowed it. When he noticed me staring, he tipped his hat. The grin beneath it was too wide. Nora tugged me back toward the line. "Come on, let's walk it." The path wound between the pumpkins, hundreds of faces leering in every direction. Most smiled, some frowned. A few grimaced so violently their mouths looked like wounds. Their light was strange, steady and strong, not the nervous flicker of real candles. "Do you smell that?" I whispered. She wrinkled her nose. "Rotten." It wasn't just rot. It was meat, burnt hair, something that made my stomach twist. The farther we walked, the thicker it grew. At the halfway mark, the pumpkin caught my eye. Its face was crude, lines gouged deep, but inside it glowed hotter than the rest, nearly white. I crouched to peer closer. The pulp inside wasn't orange. It was gray, and it pulsed faintly, as though something alive pressed against the wall of rind. Nora touched my shoulder. "Don't stare too long," she whispered, though I hadn't told her what I'd seen. Kids ran ahead, shrieking at the scarier faces, but their voices seemed muffled, dulled by the row. The pumpkin's glow cast everything into jaundiced light. My skin looked sickly in the reflection. Nora's eyes sunk in shadow. Then I heard it, a low murmur, too soft to be the crowd. I leaned closer to a grinning face. Its jagged mouth moved with the flame, and the whisper grew clearer. Stay. I jolted back. The word hissed from the pumpkin carved grin like breath escaping teeth. I grabbed Nora's arm. Did you hear that? She shook her head, but her eyes darted around, unsettled. The next pumpkin whispered too. Stay. Another. Burn. Another. Mine. The row seemed endless now. More faces, more voices, rising in a chorus that crawled under my skin. Stay. Burn. Mine. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the voices slid inside anyway, patient and persistent. Each jack-o'-lantern we passed turned its gaze as if following us. Their carved mouths twitched wider, their light flaring in rhythm with the whispers. Near the end of the row, the crowd had thinned. Families drifted back to the cider stand, kids growing tired. But a handful of people lingered, kneeling by pumpkins with blank faces, carving knives flashing in the lamplight. At first, I thought they were workers finishing the row. But when one turned, the candlelight revealed his face, or lack of it. His skin was hollowed, his eyes nothing but pits of shadow. His mouth gaped, empty and round, like a jack-o'-lantern cut wrong. Another figure leaned over a blank pumpkin. Instead of carving, he pressed his face into the rind. The skin split, sagging, until the pumpkin swallowed it whole. When he sat back, his own head glowed faintly, a candle flickering behind his hollowed features. Nora gasped, "Oh my God." I yanked her hand, heart hammering. The hollowed ones didn't chase us. They only turned their glowing faces to watch, light leaking from empty eyes. At the row's end, Mr. Mason waited by the last pumpkin, the biggest of them all, taller than me, wider than a door frame, carved with a smile so wide it nearly split the rind. Its light burned brighter than fire, pulsing like a heart. Mason's hand rested on it. The glow climbed up his arm, veins of orange threading under his skin. His grin gleamed in the glow. "Fine crop this year," he said, voice low and rough. "Plenty of room for more." His eyes flicked to Nora, then to me. "Pick your place." We didn't answer. We ran. Past the cider stand, past the parking lot, past the families who smiled like nothing was wrong. Behind us, the row whispered still, "Stay. Burn. Mine." But we didn't look back. I never returned to Mason's farm. Nora swore she wouldn't either. But every October, I hear about Pumpkin Row, breaking its own record. 2,000 pumpkins now. 3,000. People gush about the glow, the artistry, the spectacle. Photos online show endless grinning faces, brighter every year. And sometimes, in the crowd shots, I spot hollowed ones, faces lit from within, mouths open too wide, eyes burning faintly. People smiled next to them, never noticing. The pumpkins aren't decorations. They're prisons, or maybe hosts. Every year, more faces join the row. Every year, the whispers grow louder. And one October, I know Mason will see me again. He'll have saved me a place. The Candyman's house. Every town has that one house kids whisper about while they make their trick or treat rounds. For us, it was the Candyman's place. Not because it looked haunted. If anything, it was too neat. A white clapboard house with a green porch swing, shutters freshly painted every spring. The lawn never grew weeds. The hedges were trim like they had been measured with a ruler. But what made it legendary was the candy. Full sized bars. Always. Not just chocolate either. Imports. Fancy stuff. Gold foil wrapped. The kind of candy you'd only see in a grocery store display and walked past because your mom said no. Every kid in town had a story of holding something shiny from the Candyman's bowl, staring at the wrapper, and feeling like they were holding treasure. Just say thank you, parents reminded, and don't be greedy. But there was something strange, too. The Candyman never came to the door. You never saw him in the window. You rang the bell, the door swung open slow, and a porcelain bowl sat on a little table in the hallway, brimming with bars stacked high. A small hand-lettered sign rested against the bowl. Take one. Always the same, always neat. Nobody saw who put it there. Nobody admitted to seeing the Candyman at all. By the time I was 12, the Candyman's house was less a treat and more a dare. He makes a deal with kids, some swore. That's why you never see him. If you take more than one, he takes something back. Another kid said his cousin's friend once saw a shadow behind the bowl. A tall figure bent close like he was sniffing the wrappers. Halloween that year, my friends worked each other up on sugar and bravado. We should go in, Caleb said, chewing a licorice rope with a grin. Not just grab candy. Step inside. See what's back there. It's just some old guy, I said, but the words tasted like a lie. I'd grown up on the same block. I'd never once seen him outside. Not mowing, not driving, not bringing groceries in. Just the candy, every year. Perfect and endless. Come on, Nora urged, face hidden behind a plastic vampire mask. What's he gonna do? Ground us? He's probably 90. We promised each other we'd do it. Go inside just for a second. Not take more than one. Just peek. By the time the sun went down and the jack-o'-lanterns flickered on porches, my stomach was in knot. But peer pressure's a heavy thing, heavier than a sack of candy. The porch smelled faintly of sugar, as if candy dust lived in the paint. We climbed the steps 2 at a time, sneakers squeaking. The bell chimed a hollow note when I pressed it. The door opened without anyone touching it. The hallway glowed warm. There was a bowl, porcelain white, piled with gold and silver wrappers that caught the lamplight. The sign leaned, the familiar neat letters steady as ever. Take one. But this close, the air felt thick. Not just sweet, cloying, like the inside of a candy store left to melt in summer. My teeth ached just breathing it. Okay, Caleb whispered. Go. We stepped inside. The wood floor creaked once, then fell silent, like it had decided not to give us away. I reached for a bar, foreign lettering on the wrapper, something I couldn't pronounce. Cool against my fingers. Too cool, like it had just come out of the freezer. That's when I heard it. A faint rustle, like foil unwrapping in the next room. Nora grabbed my sleeve. Did you... The rustle came again, followed by a slow, steady crunch. Chewing, loud in the hush. Curiosity has its own gravity. We should have run, But we didn't. We moved down the hall, lantern light from the bowl fading behind us. The chewing grew louder, wet, and deliberate. With each step, the smell thickened. Burnt sugar, caramel, something acrid beneath it. A doorway opened to the right. Inside, shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Not books, wrappers. Candy wrappers, pressed flat and filled into neat stacks, labeled with dates. Thousands of them. My chest tightened. I stepped closer and read a few labels. 1993, 1981, 1965. Guys, I whispered, he's been doing this forever. Caleb tugged me back. His eyes were wide, his bravado gone. Look, he mouthed. At the end of the hall, the shadow of a man stretched across the wall. Tall, thin, bent over something just out of sight. The chewing stopped. The shadow stilled. Then it turned its head toward us. He stepped into the hall without a sound. His clothes were plain, dark, too clean. His face? At first I thought it was pale from the lamplight. But no, it gleamed. Skin stretched smooth and waxy, almost translucent. His mouth was ringed in sugar dust. When he smiled, bits of caramel stuck to his teeth. You like the candy? He said, voice low and sticky. Everyone likes the candy. We froze. My hand clenched the wrapper I had taken, foil crinkling too loud. You came for more, he went on, tilting his head. His eyes didn't blink. Greedy. Nora stammered, we only wanted to see. He lifted a finger. Long. Too long. He pointed at my hand. Eat. The word hung there, heavy. My stomach lurched. I wanted to drop the candy, to run, but my fingers wouldn't let go. They unwrapped the bar with a neatness that wasn't mine. My hand lifted it to my mouth. Sweetness hit my tongue. Too rich, too strong, cloying until my jaw ached. I gagged, but swallowed. The Candyman watched, smiling wider, sugar sticking in the cracks of his teeth. Good, he whispered. Now you're mine. Nora screamed, yanking me back. The wrapper slipped from my hand, falling into the hallway. Caleb grabbed my arm, and the three of us bolted for the door. The hallway stretched longer than it should have been, each step thudding on wood that didn't echo right. Behind us, the Candyman's footsteps were soft, deliberate, unhurried. The door loomed ahead, lantern glow spilling through. We dove for it, hit the porch hard, and rolled into the yard. The door slammed behind us. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, neat and calm, as though nothing had happened. We didn't stop running until we reached the corner, lungs on fire. When we finally looked back, the house sat quiet, perfect. The porch swing rocked once, slow and steady. The smell of sugar still clung to us. The candy bar I'd swallowed burned in my gut all night. I retched in the bathroom sink until dawn, but nothing came up. My throat felt coated, raw. In the mirror, my teeth looked dusted with something faint and gold, as if the sweetness had left its mark. We never spoke about it after, not to parents, not to friends. But every Halloween since, I've smelled it again, that cloying sweetness drifting through the block like a warning. I watched the kids run up the Candyman's porch, laughing, grabbing treasure from the porcelain bowl. I want to scream. I want to drag them away. But when I open my mouth, I taste caramel, and the words melt before they form. The wrappers in his shelves went back decades. Who knows how many names, how many kids walked through the door and never left whole. Maybe one day my name will be filed there too, pressed flat under neat handwriting. Maybe that was the deal when I took the bar. Every year, I swear I won't go near his porch. Every year, I feel the weight of sweetness tugging at me, pulling me closer. And I know he's waiting. The Candyman never comes out, never waves, never shows his face. He doesn't have to. We come to him. We always come to him. The costume that wouldn't come off. The costume didn't look cursed. It looked tired. I found it on a back rack at the St. Bridget's thrift, weighed between a crushed velvet cape and a suit jacket with elbow patches. The tag said $14.99 in messy marker. The shoulder pads were lopsided and the fabric smelled faintly of candles and cedar, like it had spent years in a trunk that never quite closed all the way. What sold me wasn't the suit, though. It was the mask hanging from its collar by a cracked elastic string, a paper mache face, hand painted decades ago. Not a monster, not a slasher, not a skeleton, just a grinning jester with sun-faded diamonds under each eye and a smile painted too wide, as if the artist ran out of space and kept going anyway. This one, I told the clerk, lifting it by the hanger. She looked up from her knitting. From the estate boxes, she said, like that explained something. Came in with old sheet music and a box of parade buttons. October brings out the best junk. It's not junk, I said, because I felt oddly protective of it. The mask stared at me, grin fixed, as if it agreed. Need a bag? The clerk asked. Sure. She started to slide the costume in, then stopped. Her fingers grazed the mask. It's cold, she murmured, surprised. Funny, isn't it? Like it just came in from outside. When I carried it home, the suit felt heavier than I expected, as if the hanger were made of iron. More than once I shifted it from hand to hand, and each time the jester's painted smile seemed to catch a little more light from the street. I told myself that's what paint does. It reflects. But when I hung the costume on the back of my bedroom door, the mask turned itself toward the bed. I swore I hadn't left it that way. 2 nights before Halloween, I decided to try the costume on. I told myself I was just making sure it fit for the party at Bridget and Caleb's. I told myself I was being practical. The jacket slid on like it had been waiting for me, the lining cool against my skin. The pants were a little too long, but when I rolled them once at the cuff, they sat right above my shoes. Easy? Coincidence. The mask was trickier. The elastic had dried out enough to pinch, and I had to knot it. I lifted the paper mache and caught a whiff of something like old wax and orange peel. Pleasant, in an odd way. The inside was smooth, a fingerprint pressed into the paper mache near the temple, as if someone had held it in a hurry while the paste was still wet. When I pulled it down over my face, the first thing I noticed was the weight. It didn't feel like paper anymore. It felt like a cooled metal pan, solid and expectant. I adjusted the strap. The eye holes were narrow, but the world beyond them sharpened. Colors a notch brighter, edges drawn a little darker, like someone had turned up the contrast on the night. It looks good, I told the mirror, more to hear my voice than anything. Except my voice came back a shade lower, not a full step, but enough to make me look down at my throat as if something there had shifted. I tried to take the mask off. The strap bit my hair. I tugged harder. The knot refused to budge. Okay, relax, I muttered, sliding a finger under the elastic. The edge caught my skin. My finger snagged on something. Tape? Glue? Then, with a gummy pull, the mask lifted. A few strands of my hair came with it. I hissed and set the mask on the dresser, rubbing my scalp. On the mirror, a faint chalky diamond had imprinted beneath my left eye, as if the paint had bled through. I wiped it with my thumb. It didn't smear. It didn't move at all. A trick of the light, I decided, or sleep deprivation. I'd been working long days. I hung the mask back on the suit's collar, turned it toward the wall, and told myself not to be dramatic. In the middle of the night, I woke to the sound of paper crinkling, a soft, patient noise like someone folding a letter at the end of my bed. The room was dark, the door was closed, the costume was a shadow on the wall. The mask was facing me again. Bridget and Caleb lived 3 blocks away, and the whole walk there, the mask thumped lightly against my chest. Da-dum, da-dum, as if keeping pace with the song only it could hear. I told myself it was the way I'd knotted the elastic. I told myself a lot of things that evening. The party had the usual mix. Friends balancing paper plates, bowls of candy that disappeared faster than the chips, plastic lanterns flickering on the porch. Someone had set an old soundtrack on the turntable, the record crackling pleasantly. The house smelled like cinnamon and punch. Okay, wow, Bridget said as soon as she saw me. That's vintage. Where'd you get it? St. Bridget's, I said, raising the mask just enough to sip something neon from a cup. Back rack. Caleb leaned in, peering at the paint. Handmade, he said, impressed. You can see the brush strokes. Creepy, but in a good way. I should have told them that the elastic stuck when I tried to take it off again in the hallway. I should have told them the inside of the mask was colder now than the night air, that the paper felt damp like a tongue against my cheek. Well, that sounds horrible. Instead, I laughed too loudly and asked about the music. The old kind, someone said from behind me, a voice I didn't recognize. The kind that teaches you how to move. I turned. A man in a cheap vampire cape smirked from the doorway, drink sloshing. I didn't know him. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the mask as if it were a person, as if it were the one deciding who I was tonight. We drifted through conversations. I noticed people held my gaze longer than usual, as if the narrow eye holes forced me to stare. I noticed I knew the steps to songs I didn't remember learning. When an old waltz came on, my feet made the turns before my head caught up. Did you take lessons? Bridget asked, delighted as I spun her. Since when do you know this stuff? The answer arrived from somewhere behind me, ready and rehearsed. Family thing, I heard myself say with a smile that hurt. Grandfather. He loved a dance hall. I don't have a grandfather. The lie came away smooth anyway. I left early, with a sudden headache that felt like a knot behind my eyes. The air outside was colder than it had any right to be in late October. The mask made every breath taste like wax. On my porch, I tried to remove it again. The elastic didn't give. I dug the knot with my nails until the edges of the mask pressed into my cheeks like a clamp. Off, I said aloud, angry at last. Off! Something under the paint warmed at my command. The knot slid as if it had been waiting to obey. mask lifted. A thin strip of paint, no, not paint, something like paint, stretched from my cheek to the inside of the mask, filament fine. It trembled once in the light, then snapped with a sound like a hair pulled from a sleeve. I set the mask on the hall table and didn't look at it for a long time. When I finally did, it was facing me again. The next morning, I woke up with a taste of orange peel in my mouth, as if I had fallen asleep with candy under my tongue. I hadn't. My jaw ached. I walked to the bathroom and flinched. The chalky diamond under my eye was not chalky anymore. It was skin deep, faint, but definite, like a birthmark I'd never had. I tried makeup. It didn't cover. Powder slid off the shape like dust on glass. When I pressed the spot with my fingertip, a coolness spread outward, spiderweb thin, a chill that settled beneath the surface. My finger came away clean. The mark didn't redden. I couldn't make it react like ordinary skin. At work, people stared longer than usual. "You look sharp," my boss said, nodding toward the suit jacket I insisted on wearing again for no good reason. "New?" "It's old," I said. My mouth answered before I chose the words. "It knows where it's going." I didn't know why I'd said that. I didn't know what it meant. But the sentence satisfied a part of me somewhere low and coiled, the place where a purring sound would live if people purred. When I got home, the mask was not on the table where I'd left it. It was hanging from the bedroom door on its cracked elastic, the grin even wider in the dusk. I didn't remember moving it. I knew I hadn't. "Fine," I said. "You win." I slipped the mask over my face. Relief bloomed, embarrassingly immediate, like scratching a deep itch. The headache dissolved. The room sharpened. My own reflection in the dark window made more sense than my uncovered face had all afternoon. I wore it while I made dinner. I wore it while I washed dishes. When I finally lifted the mask to set it down, a smear of that not paint stretched from my cheekbone to the inside again. Thinner this time, easier to break, as if whatever adhesive lived between us had learned my skin. I slept badly, dreaming of crowded halls and a hand at my back guiding me onto a stage. I woke with the mask on the pillow beside my head, turned toward me, the eye holes dark as wells. I avoided mirrors all day. Too dramatic, I know, but every time I caught a reflection in a storefront, in the bus window, I saw the shape of the mask where my face should be, a soft overlay, like a filter. The corners of my mouth drifted upward when I wasn't smiling. Lines formed at the edges of my eyes where the painted diamonds would sit. By afternoon, the second diamond showed up, this one beneath my right eye, a whisper of color that deepened each time I blinked. I dabbed at it with water. The mark stayed. I decided to test it, a real test, not the flinching glances I'd been giving myself. I stood in the bathroom beneath the bright light, set the mask on the counter, and faced the mirror. "Who are you?" I asked the empty room, because saying it out loud felt less like surrender. My face, my face stared back. Tired? Yes. And thinner than last month, but mine. The marks under my eyes were subtle. A stranger would think they were makeup. No reason to panic. I picked up the mask. "Who are you?" I asked, quieter. When I lifted it toward my face, my hands started trembling. Not from fear, though I wish it had been fear. From anticipation. like a runner waiting for the gun. The mask slid on as if greased. The elastic found the back of my head without my help. The world brightened. Not brighter like sunlight, brighter like a well lit stage where the edges of things step forward to be noticed. Better, I said. I didn't mean to say it, but it was true. I danced in the kitchen while the kettles boiled, steps I didn't know I knew. I tapped the counter with my knuckles, a rhythm that made sense only with the mask on. When I lifted the mask to sip tea, my mouth felt raw, as if the inside of the paper mache had been feeding me a cool breeze, and now I had to return to air like everyone else. I set the mask down and walked away without turning it to face me. From the hallway, the soft sound of paper shifting followed me, like an audience settling before a show. Halloween morning, Bridget texted. Costume parade downtown at 6. You in? I'm ready, I typed. My fingers hesitated over the letters. We're ready. I erased the second sentence before I hit send. I put the suit on early. It didn't hang the way it had the first night. It fit now. The shoulders knew where to sit. The cuffs had somehow shortened to the right length. The fabric didn't itch. If anything, it warmed me. A steady hum under the skin like a shared secret. When I fetched the mask from the bedroom, I paused at the door. For the first time, I noticed writing on the inside of the paper mache near the chin. Tiny, neat letters, the kind you make with a pen you can barely hold. Return after use. I laughed, lightheaded. To who? I asked the empty room. The mask, perhaps mercifully, didn't answer. On the walk downtown, the sky bruised spectacularly, violet sinking into the deep blue, a smear of orange at the horizon. Kids in plastic capes raced along the sidewalk. Parents herded. Friends shouted. Someone played a portable speaker too loudly. And still, beneath everything, I heard a different music. Not from any one place, from the way people moved, from the tapping of shoes and the rustle of leaves. The mask made it into a score. At the parade, Bridget spotted me first. You look amazing, she said, linking her arm through mine. Creepy, but charming. Classic you. Caleb squinted at the diamonds under my eyes. That paint is unreal. Doesn't even look like paint. It's not, I said, then swallowed. I mean, makeup. We drifted toward the town bandstand, toward the games and the caramel corn booth, and the judged costume lineup that Bridget insisted I enter. You'll win, she said, like a guarantee. I believed her, because the mask made belief easy. A man with a sash and a clipboard took names at the registration table. Name? He asked, without looking up. I started to speak. What came out wasn't mine. Pierrot, my mouth said softly, like it had said it 1,000 times. Spell that, the man asked. I spelled it. I don't know how I knew the letters. All right, Pierrot, the man said, jotting it down. Number 32. You're on in 10. Bridget blinked. New stage name? It's an old one, I said. The answer made me dizzy with happiness and dread. It was waiting its turn. The world narrowed to a circle of light in front of the stage steps. The crowd blurred. The clipboard man called numbers. Children waved plastic swords. A witch adjusted her hat. A robot tripped and laughed. When the number before mine rang out, The mask leaned forward without moving, and I followed its lean like a tide follows the moon. 32, the man called. Pierrot. I stepped onto the stage. The applause rose, polite and curious. Then I moved. Only a step or two, a small turn, a pause, and the sound changed. It sharpened. It focused. People leaned forward, smiling without realizing why. I didn't do anything special. I bowed. I tapped out a rhythm on the boards with my shoes. I held the pose of someone hearing a joke and not getting it until the very last second. But I understood something while I did it. The mask wasn't making me someone else. It was opening a door. Something stepped through me like a costume slips onto a stand. Whatever it was, it had manners. It raised my hand. It didn't make me speak. It made me better at being watched. I won second place. A child dressed as a traffic cone rightly took first. Bridget cheered like I'd come home from war. Caleb bought me a caramel apple, and I bit into it through the mask eye holes, because taking the mask off felt as unthinkable as taking skin off. When the parade ended, the air changed. Not colder, emptier. People drifted toward side streets. The band packed up. The light on the bandstand winked out one by one like eyes closing. After party? Bridget asked. We're heading to Molly's. Another time, I said, because a sound had started behind the normal sounds. A soft folding, like paper creasing. It came from the direction of St. Bridget's Thrift. It felt like a whispered invitation that assumed I'd accept. Text me, she said, and hugged me hard. Her cheek pressed against the painted diamond under my eye. She pulled back, puzzled, then smiled as if she'd forgotten the moment as it happened. I walked alone, the mask turning my head 1 degree at a time toward the shop. St. Bridget's was closed. Of course it was. The sign on the door read, Hours 10 to 6, in faded vinyl. Inside, the racks made blackened silhouettes against the dim. The clerk's stool was empty. A knitting project sat mid-row in her basket, needles stuck like flags. The door wasn't locked. I didn't jiggle it long. A soft click, a sigh of warmer air, and I was inside. No sensor beeped, no light came on. The shop smelled like old coats, cheap perfume, and a dust warmed by human hands. I could see well enough. The mask made the dim hospitable, whites whiter, shadows organized. The counter was neat, the register off. A row of paper tags lay beside a hole punch and a stack of string. I set my palm on the counter and felt a faint vibration, like someone humming under their breath, behind the wood. Hello? I called. The hum stopped. I went to the back rack on instinct. The space where I'd found the suit gaped like a lost tooth. On the crossbar above it, a dent where the hanger had hung. On the back wall, near the dressing rooms, a door I'd never noticed before stood ajar. A plain door, painted the color of old cream. No sign. A sliver of warm light ran along the floor beyond, as if a stage light had been set in the room behind. I didn't want to open it. That is, I wanted two things. One, to run. Two, to see. The second want was heavier. It pulled me forward the way tide pulls a dock rope. I pushed the door and found a room no thrift shop has a right to have. Costumes lined the walls. Real ones, not the plastic kind you buy last minute. Ball gowns, uniforms with brass buttons, capes, suits older than the town itself, masks hung from pegs, human faces and animal ones, some carved from wood, some as thin as dried leaves. None of them looked at me. All of them did. A work table slept in the middle of the room. On it, paste, brushes, a pot of pale paint with a skin forming over the top. Beside the pot lay a ledger, the paper warped with age, names marching down the pages in careful pen. I touched the ledger. The page opened on a list of returns, items, dates, signatures. My eyes landed at the bottom line, written in the same tiny hand I'd seen inside the mask. Pierrot, overdue. Return after use, I whispered. I hadn't meant to whisper it. The room wanted the words soft. A sound came from behind me. The mask turned my head before I could. The clerk stood in the doorway, hands folded, expression mild. Sorry, I said, and meant it. The door was open. It opens for who it should, she said, voice as calm as the knitting needles on her counter. People bring things back here when they're ready. I lifted a hand halfway to the mask. What happens if they don't bring them back? The clerk considered. Some things take themselves home, she said. Some people forget where they borrowed them. I didn't forget, I said, heat in my voice. I only wanted to be seen, she finished gently. Most of us do. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that the mask had found me, not the other way around. But the truth curled up at the base of my throat and waited for me to admit it. When I spoke again, the words were honest and small. It makes me better. She nodded, not unkind. That's what costumes do. She stepped into the room, resting a hand on the work table. You brought it back on the right night. That matters. I didn't say I was leaving it, I said, surprised to hear the selfishness playing in my voice. You don't have to leave it, she said. You just have to choose. She gestured to the ledger. Sign your name, and the costume knows it's not a theft. Or don't sign, and the costume knows it's not a gift. What happens if I sign and keep it? I asked. You'll remember it's borrowed, she said. You'll remember the weight of it when you don't wear it. That can help. And if I don't sign? She smiled a small, tired smile. Then it will help you remember another way. The mask warmed against my skin. The room smelled like paste and orange peel. Somewhere far away, distant as a radio in another house, I heard the thump of parade bass drums turning into heartbeats. I didn't know if the noise was a memory or present. I didn't care. I picked up the pen. It was heavier than it looked. The ledger expected my hand. The line left for me was exactly the right length. I wrote my name. The letters came out elegant, old-fashioned, a script that belonged to someone raised around fountain pens. A few drops of pale paint fell from the pen's nib and splattered the page. They soaked in like water finding a dry plant. Good, the clerk said softly. Now we can have the other conversation. What other conversation? The one about the mask. She lifted a hand toward my face, paused until I nodded permission, and then, carefully, tenderly, touched the edge of the papier-mâché where it met my cheek. Her thumb pressed the seam. This has been hungry a long time. It learns quickly when someone feeds it. I can take it off, I said, defensive. Of course you can. She studied my eyes through the narrow holes. But you won't want to, That's different. The clerk moved to a shelf and took down a small jar. Inside, a cream the color of candle smoke swirled slowly, though nothing stirred it. Old recipe, she said, for adhesive that forgets. If you want the mask to let go, you tell it so, and you use this. What if I don't want it to let go? The question surprised me with how honest it sounded. Then, don't tell it to, she said, and handed me the jar. But don't lie to yourself about which voice is doing the wanting. I put the jar in my pocket. The weight steadied me more than I expected. I realized I'd been leaning forward without noticing, my body angled toward the masks on the wall like a plant toward light. Thank you, I said. The words felt too small for the room. Return after use, she said again, as if it were a blessing, as if it were a curse. Doors remember who treats them kindly. I went home another way, avoiding the streets where I might be recognized without meaning to be. The night had thinned. The last jack-o'-lanterns on porches guttered. Wind chased paper down the block. Under the mask, my breath made a quiet pattern I didn't want to change. Inside, I set the jar on the bathroom counter and looked at myself one last time. The diamonds under my eyes shone faintly in the light. The smile painted onto the mask fit the curve my mouth had been practicing all week. I lifted my hands to the strap and paused. I'm keeping you, I said, because the choice mattered. You're borrowed. The mask warmed like a hand taking another hand. I slid it off. This time, the seam came away clean. No filaments of non-paint. No ache. My face underneath looked like mine, and didn't. The marks under my eyes remained. Fainter now, but still there, like smudges from a thumb dipped in ash. They didn't frighten me. I washed. I slept with the mask on my nightstand, turned away on purpose. I woke to find it facing me anyway, but the urge to put it on wasn't a command anymore. It was a suggestion I could decline. The next day, I returned to St. Bridget's with a small wrapped box, a good brush, the kind that holds paste the right way. The clerk took it without surprise, as if 100 people had brought 100 such offerings over the years. See you next season, she said. Maybe before, I admitted, and felt no shame in it. But I'll sign the ledger. She nodded. That's all it asks. At home, I hung the suit at the back of my closet and slid the mask into a shallow drawer, lined with tissue I'd scented lightly with orange peel because the smell comforted me. Halloween was over. The street outside returned to ordinary. People walked dogs and took out trash and forgot what it felt like to be someone else for the night. I don't want to forget. I don't want to be only one thing anymore. Sometimes I wear the mask when I make tea and dance in the kitchen to music only it knows. Sometimes I leave it in a drawer and practice bowing to the empty room, learning the steps my own way. When the want grows heavy, I dab the cream on the seam and whisper, not today. Every so often, in the quiet between songs, I hear paper folding itself somewhere just out of view. The sound of a costume choosing a person, or a person choosing a costume. Either way, I know where to go when the urge tips from harmless to hunger. I sign the ledger. I say the name it gave me and the one I carried in. I return what I borrowed and ask for it back again when the season turns. The clerk knits. The mask waits politely. Doors open, and then they close. The diamonds under my eyes never quite fade. People think they're makeup. They're not. They're a reminder that the face I wear is a costume, too, and some costumes are honest about what they want. On certain nights, when the air smells like candle wax and the porch lights flicker with that particular October tiredness, there's a knock on my door. Soft, patient, as if someone were folding paper at the threshold. I opened it and find no one there. I listen for the rest of the knock, the one that the year keeps for itself. And then I go to the drawer and decide, again, whether tonight is a night for being seen or for staying unseen. Either way, the mask never argues. It just waits on the dresser, angled so it can watch me choose. The Last Trick-or-Treater. Halloween was over. By 10 o'clock, the street had gone dark. Porch lights clicked off one by one. Kids were home trading candy, and the last stragglers shuffled down the sidewalks with tired parents trailing behind. I dumped the leftover sweets into a bowl for myself, turned off my light, and settled in front of the TV with a blanket. That's why the knock startled me. 3 sharp raps at the door. I glanced at the clock. 10:43. Too late for trick-or-treaters. Too late for anyone except trouble. I ignored it. Another knock followed. Slower this time. Reluctantly, I got up and peeked through the blinds. A child stood on my porch. Small, no taller than my doorknob. The costume was old-fashioned. Homemade, with a burlap sack mask stitched into a crude smile. A little plastic pumpkin pail dangling from one hand. I frowned. "You're late, kid," I muttered, though I didn't open the door. The figure tilted its head, waiting, patient. I cracked the door just enough to speak. "Trick-or-treat's over, buddy. Go on home." The child didn't move, didn't even shift its weight, just held out the pumpkin pail. "You should be with your parents," I tried again, scanning the street. Empty. The houses across the way were dark. No cars moved. Not even the breeze stirred the leaves. Silence hung heavy. The burlap mask tilted again. From the slit mouth came a voice, too deep, too hollow for a child. "Candy." The word scraped like something dragged over stone. My skin prickled. I grabbed a mini Snickers from the bowl and dropped it in the pail, hoping that would end it. The candy hit the plastic with a dull thud. The child didn't leave, just stood there, waiting. Minutes passed. I sat back on the couch, but I couldn't focus on the TV. Every few seconds, I checked the window. The trick-or-treater was still there, frozen in place, pumpkin pail outstretched. 11 o'clock, 11:15. No one came. No parents, no other kids, just the small figure on my porch. At 11:30, I'd had enough. I yanked the doors open. "All right, game's over. You need to..." The porch was empty. No child, no footsteps, just the pumpkin pail, sitting alone by the welcome mat. Inside it lay the candy bar I'd given, still wrapped. Only now, the wrapper bore my name, printed neatly in black ink. I shoved the pail off the porch, slammed the door, and locked it. My heart hammered as I pulled the blinds shut. Just a prank, I told myself. Just some kid with too much time. But at midnight, another knock came. This time, softer, insistent. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knocking spread. A tap at the window, a scrape at the back door. the sound of small footsteps pacing around the house, always just out of sight. The air grew heavy with the smell of burlap and damp earth. Then the voice came again, muffled through the walls. Candy? I pressed my palms to my ears. Still, the word threaded through, low and hungry. By 1 in the morning, the sound stopped. I dared to hope it was over. But when I checked the porch at dawn, the pumpkin pail sat there again. This time, it brimmed with candy. Every piece from my own bowl, wrappers crinkled and chewed. The name written on them was still mine. I should have thrown it out, burned it, but fear does strange things. I carried the pail inside, set it on the table, and tried to convince myself none of it had happened. That night, the knocking returned. I didn't answer, not at the door, not at the windows. I hid in my room, blanket over my head like a child. Sometime after 2, exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke up, the pumpkin pail was beside my bed. My name scrawled over the plastic in neat black letters. The following Halloween, I refused to hand out candy. Porch light off, blinds drawn, house silent. No kids came by. No one knocked. Until 10:43 p.m. The same 3 raps at the door. My body locked. I stayed perfectly still, not daring to breathe. A minute passed. 2. Then came the voice, closer now, pressed against the wood. Candy? This time, I had none to give. The knock came again, louder, shaking the frame. Then at the window, then the back door. Every surface rapped in unison until the house throbbed with it. I curled on the floor, hands over my ears, whispering prayers I didn't believe. And then, silence. Morning light came like mercy. I stumbled to the door. The porch was empty. No pail, no mask, no child. Only the faint scent of burlap lingered in the air. I thought maybe I was free. Maybe the thing had grown bored. But later that week, walking home, I noticed something carved into the sidewalk at the end of my street. 3 words etched deep into the concrete. Trick or me. Now, every Halloween, I wait. I leave no candy. I turn off every light. I pray the knocking passes me by. But sometimes, late at night, I dream of burlap faces and pumpkin pails, and a voice that won't stop whispering my name. And I know I wasn't the one who chose to play. I was chosen. And one year, when the clock strikes 10:43 p.m., I'll open the door, because the last trick-or-treater never leaves empty-handed. What do you give a girl that has everything? Penicillin. Meh. OldDadGuy. You thought you were alone, didn't you? But they've been watching the whole time. Like, subscribe, and maybe they'll let you sleep tonight.